Welcome to HB Reddit Stories. Today we will see stories of r/am I the a-hole. Am I the a-hole for telling my wife she's wrong and that my mom is right? I, 35M, have been married to my wife, 32F, for 5 years, and we've been struggling financially for the past few months. I lost my job about 3 months ago, and while I found part-time work, it doesn't pay nearly as much as before. We've had to cut back on a lot of things, but it feels like no matter what we do, we're still living paycheck to paycheck and even pulling from savings. Recently, my mom, 65F, came over to visit, and she noticed how stressed I was about the money situation. She offered some advice on how we could save money, things like cutting down on takeout, meal prepping to avoid buying groceries multiple times a week, and switching to cheaper brands. My mom has always been frugal, especially when she was raising me and my siblings on a tight budget. I thought it made sense, especially since we're really trying to save wherever we can. I asked if she was willing to go through our spending and show where we could cut down. My wife agreed with this. She made a whole spreadsheet about our spending, and we are spending way too much on fun stuff. We don't need Starbucks every day and so on. It also became apparent that most of the fun spending was my wife's. TBH, my wife didn't take the breakdown well and started arguing with my mom that her spreadsheet was wrong. She said that my mom's way of doing things is outdated and doesn't work for us. She doesn't want to give up buying organic produce, and she likes having variety in what we eat each week. I tried to explain that we need to make some sacrifices if we want to get out of this financial hole, but she kept insisting that things weren't as bad as I was making them out to be and that we just needed to ride it out. My mom left at this point and we were still arguing, and she told me she can't give up her takeout. She also went on about my mom being wrong. That's when I lost my patience and said, "You're wrong. My mom is right. She managed to raise 3 kids on one income, and we can't even cut back on groceries for a few months." My wife got really upset, saying I am being a huge jerk for whining with my mom and that my mom is outdated. She's barely spoken to me since, and now I'm wondering if I went too far. But the way I see it, we need to be realistic about our situation, and my mom's advice could actually help us get back on track. Top comments. Not the a-hole. Your wife agreed to go through your budget with your mom took the time and effort to review things, and then it sounds like your wife was very rude and dismissive. As far as I know, math hasn't changed that much in the last 30 years, so it's not clear how your mom's views are outdated. Info. You mentioned your own loss of a job and working part-time. Does your wife work? Is she the primary earner right now? Opie replies. She works part-time as doesn't wish to go full-time. It's not good for her mental health. I'm still the primary earner even with part-time. Not the a-hole. Your wife wants to continue the lifestyle you had before you lost your job. She's closed to any compromise that could affect her lifestyle. She refuses to see how dire your financial situation is. She refuses to take any responsibilities. Your wife is okay with your mother's input only if your mother says what she wants to hear. Was the F necessary? Probably not. But, in this context, with the frustration building up, I can understand the word slipping here. So, no, not the a-hole, even with this word. I'd ask your wife what are the solutions according to her then. If your mother is wrong and your wife is right, then ask her to explain to you how she is right. What solutions can she propose? Here are other things that you could tell her. Meal prep can be boring indeed. But, instead of meal prep, you could ingredient prep. Meaning that you could prep a bunch of ingredients that can be used in different recipes. There's a whole community on YouTube doing it and giving ideas. Instead of her daily Starbucks, she could cut it down to once a week. The rest of the week, you could buy the ingredients that creates her mocha pumpkin spice with whipped cream and cacao powder coffee, and she could make it herself at home. Most of the time, it ends up 10x better and 10x less expensive. You could cut down the takeout at once a week and transforming it into a romantic night. Those are the solutions your mother told you already, but with a positive note added to it. Now, of course your problem seems deeper than just trying to put everything into a positive perspective. Your wife is acting extremely childish. But for the problem at hand, I think it might work. As for your wife and her attitude, I'm kind of out of words here. Edit, I know, my comment is already long. I just read a few of your answers and goddamn. You have a wife problem here. She refuses to work full-time because it's bad for her mental health. You lost your job, she needs to put more effort right now. That's what partnership is all about. She is extremely selfish and entitled. You don't just have a temporary financial problem, you have a full-time wife problem. She refuses to put any effort on every front of your relationship, as far as I know. She is waiting for you to do almost everything, financially speaking. This needs to be addressed more seriously. Her lack of responsibility and effort into this relationship is a huge red flag. Next story. Am I the a-hole for demanding that my niece, or her parents, pay me back for the hundreds of dollars of perfume she stole from me? Note, I'm not involving the police, suing anyone, etc. Please don't try to argue with me about this or convince me why I should. I have a perfume collection that I started when I was a teenager slinging burritos as my first job. I have over 400 bottles at this point. I take great pride in my collection, and I use it. I'm also happy to give people decants, samples, of most of my bottles, let them sample a spray or two, give some bottles as gifts, etc. What I have a huge issue with is my 17-year-old niece coming into my home under the guise of walking my dog, decanting bottles on her own and selling the samples to her little friends. She thinks that because I have so many bottles, I wouldn't notice some missing or getting massive dents in them. Well, little Miss Entrepreneur failed to realize that her private Instagram wasn't friends only or whatever, and I saw each and every story with each price and sample she had. I tallied that crap up and got a pretty good estimate based on cost per ounce. Thankfully, she mostly picked the TikTok famous perfumes like Bianco Latte and Escapade Gourmand and didn't go for the most rare, niche perfumes. She did snatch an entire 2.5-ounce bottle of Baccarat Rouge, though, which runs $300 plus at most retailers, as well as full bottles of perfumes you can get at Sephora. Like Marc Jacobs Daisy, Burberry Her Elixir, Flower Bomb, etc. Petty or not, I printed out the entire list of what she'd taken, price estimate, and handed it off to my sister, her mom. I said that I expect to be paid back, in full. And of course her sneaky little butt is never allowed in my home again. My sister got super pissed with me going on about how my niece is just a kid, kids make mistakes, etc. I said yes, kids make mistakes, and this is a great way for my niece to learn from hers. Their argument is that now the money she was going to use for a car has to go towards paying me back. I don't care. She is lucky that I have no interest in involving the police, small claims, or any of that. But am I the a-hole, because she is a teenager? Top comments. She's just a kid who created a successful business enterprise selling stolen property. Not the a-hole. OP replies. This is part of what bugs me. If she had come to me and asked me if she could sell a handful of her friends some samples, I might have entertained the idea. I know getting samples for niche perfumes is a hassle. But nope, she screwed herself out of that one. Not the a-hole. I can see from the fact that her mom considers a 17-year-old just a kid, as if she were a 5-year-old who stole a cookie before dinner, has caused her to act very entitled. She made a series of decisions to steal from you and profit from it. And she's either just a kid when she's stealing pricey scents, or she's an almost adult saving up for a car. Can't have it both ways on your dime. You'll be teaching her a better lesson than her mom bothered to. Decants from rare vintage perfumes can go for substantial amounts, people make a living off of this. Your niece decided to defraud you hoping she would never get caught. I think her parent needs to take a hard look at the morals of her child. OP replies. I am so thankful that she doesn't have an eye for vintage perfumes and only took the popular stuff. Not the a-hole. I don't see how her not having a car is your problem. The money she has for the car is made from selling perfume she stole from you. She's lucky the consequences are not more serious. I guess she won't have a car until she figures out legitimate ways to earn money that doesn't involve stealing. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my mom and sister the best help they can give is to shut the F up? My wife gave birth to our son 6 weeks ago. He's healthy and doing great. My wife is doing okay. Physically she's pretty much fine, but emotionally she is fragile right now. She's dealing with some anxiety post-baby, some other mental health problems she had from before pregnancy. She has worked on them in therapy, but the pregnancy and PP hormones have flared up some stuff on her. She's also disappointed she couldn't breastfeed. She didn't try to, but that was in her best interest not to. And her reasons are not something she shares openly, but I'm aware, and so are her family who know her history. But she grew up in a home where the women breastfed. And while they understand, my mom and sister are also very pro-breastfeeding, like militant about it. I warned them before my wife gave birth that they were not to try and pressure her or give her helpful tips about it when it was not happening. They didn't listen to me and brought her some info from a breastfeeding group they're both members of and told her there was zero reason for her not try. This resulted in me telling them to leave. I let the rest of my family stay since they were good. But I told my mom and sister they had ignored my warning, and I gave them a very clear one. They were shocked. They said my wife never expressed a good reason for not being able to. I stated she doesn't need to answer to either of them. They asked a few times after this when they could visit, and I said not until they understand that they cannot cross that boundary that has been set. They brought me into a group call a few days ago and told me they want to come see us, and I asked if they were going to respect the boundary. They told me they just want to help. I told them the best help they can give is to shut the F up and be supportive of what she's doing. I said otherwise their help is not needed and would not be helpful in any way. They accused me of being too harsh and disrespectful in the way I was talking to them, and they feel like they're being punished for looking out for my wife and my son's best interests. I said they're not doing that. They're doing what they think is best even after everything I said to them. So they're angry. I told them to shut the F up. Am I the a-hole? Top comments. Not the a-hole. In fact, you're pretty much my hero. I also was unable to breastfeed. Militant is exactly what those lactation consultants were. My experience is you need really strong boundaries if you are unable or choose not to breastfeed. You're doing a great job caring for your wife. Opie replies. Yes, that's what I'm learning too. With women in the family like mine, you really need to be on the same page and be willing to shut it down. And yet breastfeeding is such a personal choice. I was all about it, until my baby actually came. I didn't even want to try. She was formula fed, she's been healthy, and she's very intelligent. I don't regret not doing it at all. Anyone that gave me any lip about it, I was done with them. Luckily, it was just one doc who shamed me. Found another one, all was well. Opie replies. I'm glad you didn't have to experience much shaming. I think people like my mom and sister who put a lot of pressure on new parents and those who choose not to breastfeed are awful. At the end of the day, if it's not your body and your kid, it's not your business. But some people like to try and make it their business regardless of who's involved. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my sister the reason her daughter always wants to be at my house is because of how dysfunctional her household is? My sister got married 2.5-ish years ago and blended her daughter, 7, and her husband's son, 12, and daughter, 10, together. Or at least they have tried/wanted to. But it hasn't worked out that way. My sister's daughter had a pretty awful father and he died when she was a baby. My sisters defended a lot from him until she'd had enough 5 months into her pregnancy and left. So she's not known for making the best decisions all the time, even with support, and she had a lot of it. Her husband's kids don't know their mom, but she's alive and out there somewhere but doesn't want to know them. I'm not entirely sure how long my sister and her husband were together before they got married, but around 2 years would be my guess. Anyway, it was pretty clear pre-wedding that her husband's kids were not happy at the idea of blending families. They always seemed so hostile when talking to my sister or any of us, me, parents, other siblings. They would glare at my sister's daughter for no reason other than she was in their line of sight. At the wedding they kept moving away from everyone and were saying mean things to my sister's daughter when they were asked to sit or stand together. When corrected, they would tell whoever to shut up. They also never want to play with the other kids in our family, even the kids the same age as them. In the time my sister and her husband have been married, my niece has heard that nobody wants her, that the kids would rather die than sit next to her at dinner, that she's not their sibling and they hate her, that her step-siblings would rather be grounded than be in the car at the same time as her, that they'd rather be punished than pass her something, say she wants the salt or whatever. It happens when they're out too. I was with them once and the oldest said he was not sitting next to her. Looked very disgusted at the very idea of it. They also try to say she smells bad. They act like the other is being punished when sitting next to her. They'll even turn their backs to her and shut her out that way. I started asking my sister if her daughter could come to play with my friends and my wife, and I have loved having her. She comes once or twice a week now and she always wants to come more. My sister is starting to get annoyed by it. And she asked me yesterday why her daughter is always so eager to be at my house and why she'd rather be at my house than home. I told her it's because her household is dysfunctional and she has been repeatedly reminded two people don't want her there and actively go out of their way to hurt her feelings. I said no kid wants that. She asked me how I could judge and then told me it's really none of my business to comment like that. I reminded her that she asked. She shut down and stormed off. Am I the a-hole? Top comments. Not the a-hole. Even without asking, someone should tell it bluntly to her. Her kid is hurting and she does nothing. If she wants to stay blind to these issues, I wouldn't be surprised if her daughter runs away the second she could. She is failing her own kid every day now. But I recommend to keep an eye on this situation, as those kids can escalate to violence or endangering your niece. They're going pretty out of way to hurt her just because they are mad at their dad. This won't just go away. Opie replies. It won't, and we keep a careful eye on them. There are times I worry what'd happen if my sister and her husband left them alone in the house together. Would they lock her out? Would they prevent her from getting food? Not the a-hole. She asked why. You told her why. Either she didn't know already, meaning she's an idiot or at least not paying attention, or she does know and doesn't act on it, which borders on child abuse. On a side note, I really wish people would think properly about blending families and just hold off until all kids are either okay with it, or moved out. Not the a-hole. That poor girl. I just hope her mother doesn't prevent her from coming to your house in the future. Maybe next time you could approach the subject with your sister in a more proactive way, focusing on your niece's well-being and need to feel loved, and not on the family's dysfunction. Try to help her find solutions to the step-siblings not wanting the girl, without sounding judgmental. I know it's hard, especially now that your sister is defensive, but a solution is urgent here. For the step-siblings as well, none of the kids have accepted their parents' marriage here and the adults have been turning a blind eye. Big hugs. Opie replies. My sister isn't good with taking advice or accepting help for stuff like this. She has to reach the conclusion herself. As a family, we learned this from the time she was with her ex. The hardest part is watching my niece suffer as a result. Which is why my house will always be open to her. Next story. Am I the a-hole for not selling an expensive laptop I was given so my parents can afford for my sister to go to an autism program? My 12-year-old sister has autism. The older she gets, the more trouble she has interacting with people and calming herself. When she was younger, she could self-soothe and other things so much better than now. Her behavior is way worse than before too. She cries a lot more, screams a lot more, and she breaks stuff more often. Not to mention she spits out food way more often than before too, because food can be sensory overload for her. My parents have spent a lot of time and money trying to get her all the help she needs and trying to make life more comfortable and accessible for her. This comes at my expense a lot. I don't get to go out with friends very much unless a friend can pay for me. My stuff is all secondhand, including my school laptop, which I needed for high school, that can do so little because it's so old and slow and takes forever to use. I don't get new clothes. I don't get nice gifts from my parents for birthdays and Christmas. They try to still spend some time with me, or their treat for me is occasionally letting me get a dessert somewhere, because we don't buy those anymore since they see it as money that can be saved and put to helping my sister. A few months ago my parents learned about this program for autistic tweens and teens. It's expensive to join and they don't offer any financial aid with it. But a lot of people swear it's a great resource for kids who could use help socializing, making new friends, and even learning how to handle emotional control again. They have therapists, psychologists, and adults with autism who have experience with this stuff to help kids. On top of activities and stuff. They started saving, but it's such an expensive program. It happens after school and weekends, and you can choose when your kid joins. 3 weeks ago I was given a gaming laptop by someone close to me. This laptop costs more than 1K and was the nicest thing anyone ever gave me and really blew me away. I asked someone to keep it safe for me, because I was worried my sister would break it. When my parents learned about it through another person, they suggested it would be better sold and the money used for the program for my sister. I said no. They asked me why I need something so expensive when it could be put to way better use. I told them I want the laptop and I can look forward to using it in a couple of years. They said it's selfish to think of wants over needs. I told them it was a gift for me and not my sister. They said I already have a laptop and I brought up how it's basically a sloth. They said it still cost them $70, which is a lot for them. Then they told me I already have a job so I could save and buy a laptop in a few years. But to think of how much that money would benefit my sister. I kept saying no and my parents think I'm the a-hole. Am I the a-hole? Top comments. Not the a-hole. You are allowed to have nice things even if their value could be better used to support someone else in your family. Your parents are wrong to take things away from you in order to do more for your siblings. In this case, what they want to do amounts to theft and conversion, which is taking your things without your permission and then using their value to pay for things they want. The fact they are related to you does not make that sort of behavior okay. Please tell whoever gifted you the laptop what's going on, and possibly talk to a counselor at school to see if you can find an adult who can intervene for you. Oh, the old, you have to gooey up everything for the special needs family member situation. Guess what? You're not the parent. You're not responsible for caring/providing for your sister. First they want you to sell the laptop. Then it will be, you have a job, you can afford to give some of your pay to help your sister. Tell them they can sell the old laptop. Not the a-hole. Not the a-hole. It's unfortunate that you all as a family have had to forego so much for your sister, and while I can sympathize with your parents, I believe there's an extent to which a sibling should be expected to sacrifice. I would suggest that you keep saving diligently and extract yourself from this house. This sort of perpetual cycle of deprivation is not good to be exposed to or to be made to feel guilty about very basic human desires such as holding on to a gift, wanting a reliable laptop, and wanting to enjoy your life. As for the $70 they paid for the laptop, how about you pay them that and ignore anything else they have to say? I hope you guys liked this video. If you did, make sure like, comment, share and subscribe the channel HB Reddit Stories.